Hello everyone. In this video, you will learn how to create deeply nested multi-level drop-down menus. It was requested by Dave J1K. Thank you Dave for this suggestion. I recently started making videos on Vue.js and Tailwind CSS. So if there is something you would like me to explain or make a tutorial on, please feel free to request it and I'll be happy to make a video on that. Back to multi-level drop-down menus. First, we'll start with a simple example using only Tailwind CSS and no JavaScript. This basic dropdown will help you understand the fundamental structure. Next, we will create a more complex dropdown with 2 and 3 levels of nesting. We will use mouse over, mouse leave events, reactive variables with ref, and vif directive to achieve this. Finally, we will explore a dynamic way where we render the categories and further categories using an array of objects. This way is highly recommended for scalability and easy modification. Apart from the technologies we used earlier, we will also use v4 here. By the end of this video, you will have a clear understanding of how to build and style multi-level dropdowns, and you will know which approach to choose based on your project requirements. Let's get started. Here I am in my blank Vue.js project. I have only installed Tailwind CSS. Let's start by designing a page background. So I'm assuming a clothing store. It's a good example for multi-level dropdown. I styled it a bit just for demonstration. Now the actual code regarding the multi-level dropdown starts. So now we have a menu, and under the menu, I want to have shirts, trousers, accessories, and shoes, for example. So I'm creating those. So now I have men, which is the main category, and then subcategories: shirts, trousers, shoes, and accessories. Now the goal for this using only Tailwind CSS is to show the menu, the drop-down menu, when we hover on men. We do that using the utility called group and group hover in Tailwind CSS. Let me show you. First, we will keep this men and the drop-down menu in a parent container. Now we'll assign the group to the parent container, and we'll hide this drop-down menu by default, and then we add the group hover to display it. So now when we hover on this element which has only men now, if we hover on men, we can see the drop down. But as you saw, it is not working properly because it's not positioned well. So let's position it correctly. We'll give a relative positioning to the parent, and to the drop down menu we'll give an absolute positioning, and we want to show it right under men. So I'll give a top of full. So it's full width of men, so it will be exactly under men, and left I'll give 0. And I'll also give a background to the drop down. So if I hover men now, it's exactly under men, and we have the items, the subcategories. Let's style it a bit. We'll change the color on hover so we know on which category we are hovering. And we'll also make the cursor a pointer. So now we see. So So that's all. Using Tailwind, this is how you show a drop down menu. But going beyond this is not possible just by using Tailwind CSS. You need JavaScript if you want to show further categories on hovering these main categories. Now we will use the Vue.js specific techniques to create multi-level drop-down menus. I'll remove these group utilities first. So now we have a main category and then a subcategory. We'll add script to this Vue.js template. If you don't know, in Vue.js we write the code of the body in the template and we write the logic in the script. And script setup is specific to Vue.js 3, which uses composition API, which is the latest one and the preferred one to create Vue.js projects. So in this we import ref first. And now we'll create a reactive variable to store the state of the dropdown to see if it is open or not. For example, is men dropdown open or is men open equal to ref of false. We'll give a value of false, and based on this we will show or hide the dropdown. So this is the dropdown container. So here we'll write if means if is men open is true, then show, otherwise not. By default it is false, so it is not showing. Now we use mouse over and mouse leave events to show or hide this dropdown. So @mouse over, and we'll make this true, and @mouse leave will make this false. So when we hover we see the dropdown, when we leave the dropdown disappears. This is the only logic you need to know to create a multi-level dropdown, because all we do now is just repeating this logic inside each category. For example, if you want separate categories under accessories, for example watches, bracelets, chains, you will repeat the same process and you will write it inside this code, inside this element. Let me show an example. We'll create a new ref, is men accessories open. By default it is false. Now inside this category we will create a drop-down with subcategories. And we show this drop-down only when if is men accessories open is true, means if is men accessories open. And we control this visibility of this using the same mouse over mouse leave on the accessories. So when we hover on accessories it should show these three subcategories. So I'll just copy these two, I'll paste it on accessories, and instead of is men open I'll paste is men accessories open. And we will also style this, but first let's see if it is working. So men, and on hovering accessories you see these watches, bracelets and chains. Now let's style it. Again we'll give a relative position to the parent, and we'll give an absolute positioning to the drop down menu. So here I want the drop down to appear to the right and not under it, so I'll write left Full means full width from the left side, which will be exactly next to accessories. And then top 2. I'll give a background. Top 2 because I want to have a slight differentiation between this category and this subcategory. Now let's style the subcategory items as well. X4 UI2 and then F over PG Indigo. So now we have 2 levels. So we have men, and under this we have some categories, and under accessories we have some subcategories, watches, bracelets, and chains. And we did not use any extra logic. We just created a variable. Then based on that, we are showing a drop down using VIF, and we are controlling this visibility using mouse over and mouse leave, like showing and hiding this drop down. Now I'll show you how to add another one. In most scenarios, I like to keep it only 2 levels. This is okay and this looks good for user experience, but I see some websites, maybe like Amazon, some other websites, they have a lot of categories, so sometimes they tend to add another level. So I will just show you because you should know, but in general I don't prefer to have so many levels. And all we have to do is just to repeat the process. So we'll create another reactive variable. For example, we'll go for watches, and we'll put brands as its subcategory. So is men watches open, for false, and we use this variable to show or hide the categories inside watches. So inside watches, we'll create a div with the subcategories. That is probably fastback, the brand, then Rolex, and Casio. Enough, 3 are enough. Now we'll control the visibility of this by using VIF this variable. So if this variable is true, then we can see these brands, otherwise we don't. So we'll use again same mouse over and mouse leave on this watches element. This is the parent element here, and this is the child element in this scenario. Right, instead of accessories, here we'll replace with our new variable is men watches open true false. Same, we haven't given the position yet, so it should work now, but it doesn't look good. So see, watches, we have the brand. Now same styling as before, we'll give relative positioning to the parent and then absolute positioning to the child. And also for the items, I'll just copy paste the items. I'll just copy paste the item styling. If you don't know how I did like pasting on 3 lines at the same time, on Windows you just need to press Alt and hold Shift and then press again where you want. So click somewhere, then hold Alt and Shift and click where you want to end that. So that's how you do that. Just a tip in the middle. Now if we hover on men, we have main categories, then subcategories, and watches categories under this watch. So this is how we create a multi-level drop-down menu. Now the code is not so complex because it's only like single main category. Under that we have some categories. Let me show you something that I already did with a lot of categories. Here is the improvised version I was talking about. I've just added a background image to this, and I've changed the background of the subcategories and the items inside those. Here you can see I've just added a transparent white background, and for hovering on the items I've added a gradient background from transparent to white color. So that's the only difference that changed the entire look, but remaining everything it's same. But let me show you what I did here. As you are seeing, it's a lot of code for simple logic. So I created a reactive variable for every dropdown to keep track of its state, and I was controlling using mouse over and mouse leave and vif. So the logic did not change, it's the same logic but on a larger scale. I've just added a lot of items to each category. This is not a recommended way of doing this since we have a lot of categories. If you have just one or two, it's fine, but if you have a lot more, and maybe in future if you want to add more items to these existing categories, this might get real messy. As you can see, it's 700 lines of code for a simple logic. This is not the best way of writing code for this kind of multi-level dropdown, because for a few dropdowns we have created 20 variables and we have around 700 lines of code, and this is a lot. So let me show you a better way of writing to get the exact same result. If you noticed, nothing changed on the left side. It's still the exact same result, but the code is different. See, on the right side we have around 250 lines of code, and in that the majority of the space is occupied by this data array of objects. So if we remove this 115 lines, it's just around 100 lines of code. So almost 7 times lesser than the previous version. We had 700 plus lines of code in the other version, and now we are getting the same result with just around 100 lines of code. This is because of this data. Previously we used each and every item that we want to show here inside this template and style them individually and use the logic on them individually. Now because of this data, we can dynamically apply the logic and style them to get the same result. Let me briefly show you the code. I don't want to delve much into this code because you might get confused, but I will also explain the same logic using the data here later, which will give you more clarity. So first, we are using v4 directive. This in Vue.js is used to loop items. So we are looping the data inside this data array, and we are rendering the label. So this is the label men, women, and kids. Let me show you the variables I created before explaining the logic. So you see there is sub dropdowns, item dropdowns, and sub item dropdowns. These are the sub dropdowns. Then these are the item dropdowns, means the top where, bottom where. These are the item dropdowns. Under kids we have 3 levels. So this is sub dropdown, then this is item dropdown, and then this is sub item dropdown. So the logic goes like this. Let's go to the beginning again. So if the sub dropdowns has label, then we will render the labels of that particular category. Then we will again check if that subcategory has another label inside it. If there is another label, then we will render that label and items inside that label. Let me collapse this. If there is no label in the dropdown, then we will just render the item. Let me explain the same thing using the array of objects in the data variable and also from the UI, so you get a better idea on this. So see, on the right side you have data which has label dropdown, and inside dropdown you have label and dropdown again. And for the kids, label drop down, inside this label drop down, inside this again label and drop down. So 3 levels. For men and women it's only 2 levels, label drop down, label drop down. For kids it's 3 levels. So I've named them sub drop downs, item drop downs, and sub item drop downs. So on when we hover on men, we get the top wear, bottom wear, accessories and shoes. These are the sub drop downs. And when we hover on top wear, bottom wear, accessories, these are the item drop downs. And for sub item drop downs we have to go to kits. So these are sub drop downs, then item drop downs, and then sub item drop downs. So the logic is, when you hover on this, if there is a label in that, it will render the label. So the first level is it renders men, women and kids. Then it checks in this drop down if there is a label again. So here we have label top wear. So when we hover, since there is a label top wear, we are rendering top wear. Same way bottom wear, accessories and shoes. Now again it will check if there is a label inside this, it will render another drop down menu. But since we don't have a label inside this drop down, we don't have label, we just have items. So it will just render the items. In kits that is not the case. We have the main drop down. So when you hover on boys, it will check again if there is a label in that. Then we see that there is a label called top wear. So again it will render these drop down menus, and then it will render the items inside the drop down. I hope you understood the logic, but if you didn't, don't worry, it might be confusing for many people at the first time. Try the basic drop down using just Tailwind CSS, then try with just 1 or 2 variables using Vue.js logic. If you are comfortable with that, then try to create using the array of objects. If you still have doubts, feel free to comment below or message me on Twitter. I will be more than happy to clarify anything. I'm sure this video has helped many of you. If so, please like the video and subscribe to my channel for more videos. Thank you for watching.